movements, meanings, significance, and components. Unit 1 Social movements, meanings, significance, and components. You know, where there is a society, there is a number of movements. Every society has witnessed a number of movements, be it social, be it political, be it otherwise. There are number of social movements in each and every society, and history says that each period from ancient till the present time, the society faces a number of movements very often in different angles, but its variation is there. All movements are not same. Their nature, scope, and frequency, nature, scope, and frequency of each and every movement differ from one to another. So that social movement, if it is inevitable to society, then it has its importance, it has its study of depth in nature, so that we should study what is social movement, what is its meaning, what is its significance, and its various components. You know, social movement was traced early in the 18th century, firstly in England. The economic and political transformation in England is regarded as first ever social movement in the world. ସମଗ୍ର ପୃଥିବୀରେ ଅଷ୍ଟାଦଶ ଶତାବ୍ଦୀର ମଧ୍ୟଭାଗରେ ୟୁରୋପର ଅନ୍ୟତମ ସମୃଦ୍ଧ ଏବଂ ସବୁଠାରୁ ସଭ୍ୟ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ବୋଲି ପରିଚିତ ହେଉଥିବା ଇଂଲଣ୍ଡରେ ଯେଉଁ ଅର୍ଥନୈତିକ ଏବଂ ରାଜନୈତିକ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ ହେଇଥିଲା, ତାକୁ ହିଁ ପୃଥିବୀର ସର୍ବପ୍ରଥମ ସାମାଜିକ ଆନ୍ଦୋଳନ ବୋଲି ଆଖ୍ୟା ଦିଆଯାଇଥାଏ। The social movements can be studied from different angles. You know, there are number of social movements. We can we can found number of examples. Such movements we can say abolition of slavery by दास प्रथार उच्छेद by विलोप, French Revolution, October Revolution, that is called Russian Revolution, American War of Independence, Indian Freedom Movement, so also women movement, transgender rights, individual rights, non-proliferation treaty, environmental revolution. All these are a number of instances of socio-political or socio-economic movement. You know, these movements are very vital for the movement of the society. There is very depth of importance of each and every social movement, not only for those who are dissatisfied with the present social and political order, but also to those who are contented with the system to understand fragility of the political institutions and their future. You know, social movements ହେଉଛି ଏକ ଜନସାଧାରଣଙ୍କ ସାମୂହିକ ପ୍ରକ୍ରିୟା, ଯାହା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଜନସାଧାରଣ ଆବଶ୍ୟକ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ ଆଣନ୍ତି କିମ୍ବା ଅନାବଶ୍ୟକ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନକୁ ବିରୋଧ କରନ୍ତି। Social movement may be termed a complete transformation of present social order or to uphold the present social order from its transformation. In each and every social movement, more or less, all individuals participate in that movement. So that इतिहास को परिवर्तन करिया पई जनसाधारण सदा सर्वदा आगु आसंती से माने सामूहिक भाव में मिलित प्रचेष्टा करती एवं सामूहिक प्रयास जड़े जड़े अंशीदार हुंती। तेणु प्रत्येक आंदोलन सामाजिक प्रकृतिर होइथिले ताकू आमे सामाजिक आंदोलन बोली कहिबा। There is no specific meaning of social movement. Social movement रो कोनोसी निर्दिष्ट अर्थ ही नहीं। डिफरेंट एंगल रु डिफरेंट इंटरप्रिटेशन दृष्टि रु तार अर्थ डिफरेंट हेकि स्थिर करा जायछि। In common parlance, the term social movement is often used loosely, conveying different meanings. Sometimes it is used to show a historical trend like modernization or urbanization, आधुनिकीकरण बा शहरीकरण प्रक्रिया को मध्य सामाजिक आंदोलन रो आख्या दिया जाई पारिबो। The term social movement is also used to indicate a set of activities undertaken by one or many organizations to bring a change in the society. Transformation of the present order is the chief aim of each and every social movement. Then number of authors have put forth their views what is or what can be a social movement. According to Herbert Bloomer, social movements definition. According to Herbert Bloomer, social movements can be viewed as collective enterprises to establish a new order of life. They have their inception in the condition of unrest and derive their motive power on one hand from dissatisfaction with the current form of life and on the other hand from wishes and hopes for a new scheme or system of living. यार अर्थ होची सामाजिक आंदोलन गुड़िक नूतन जीवन शैली प्रतिष्ठा पाई एक सामूहिक प्रतिष्ठा जहाँ हर्बर्ट ब्लूमर कहते। सोशल मूवमेंट्स कैन बी viewed as a collective enterprises to establish a new order of life. नूतन जीवन शैली तांको मतरे एही आंदोलन अशांतिर परिवेश रे सृष्टि होई क्षमता पाई लालसा रखी था। यह प्रचलित जीवन शैली उपरे प्रतिष्ठा होई नूतन जीवन शैली पाई आशा संचार करिथा। हर्बर्ट ब्लूमर डेफिनेशन अकॉर्डिंग टू डॉक मैकडम डेफिनेशन तांको मतरे मैकडम को डेफिनेशन होची सोशल मूवमेंट्स आर दोज ऑर्गेनाइज्ड एफर्ट्स on the part of excluded groups to promote or resist changes in the structure of society that involve recourse to non-institutional forms of political participation. अर्थात समाज रो बाद पड़िथिबा गोष्ठी संगठित भाव में उद्यम करी सामाजिक संरचना रे परिवर्तन आनिबा किंबा कोनोसी परिवर्तन विरोध को सामाजिक आंदोलन कहते। यह आंदोलन एक स्वतंत्र एकतार परिवेश रे सामूहिक उद्देश्य हासिल करिवा पाई विरोधी कर्तृपक्षों सह भाव विनिमय करिथा. That means above two definitions show that there are three elements of social movement. प्रत्येक सामाजिक आंदोलन तीनोटी उपादान रही. There are three elements. One, first is collectively by collective action. Second is social change. Third one is common purpose. Social movement is a movement of each and every individual residing in a particular society. It is a collective action, not individual action. Collectively motivated persons drive out a social movement. Secondly, the social movement aims at a social change. Social movement aims at a social change, and that change is characterized with common purpose. सामूहिक उद्देश्य थिबो, परिवर्तनर लक्ष्य थिबो एवं सम्मिलित प्रचेष्टा थिबो, सम्मिलित अंशग्रहण थिबो. Then it can be termed as a social movement. In other words, social movement involves any collective struggle aiming at bringing social transformation, questioning prevailing hegemony. Hegemony means leadership and dominance, property relations, power relations, assertion for identity against the perceived adversaries, and resisting dominance. Struggle for justice aims को उद्देश्य रे सबु सामाजिक आंदोलन होता. उद्देश्य होची to bring out a social transformation. Purpose होची questioning prevailing hegemony and dominance. Maybe property relation, maybe power relation, maybe purposes, maybe assertion for identity against the perceived adversaries and resisting dominance, maybe for struggle for justice, maybe involves capturing or influencing political authority, though it may not be on the immediate agenda. The difference between social and political movement is merely semantic. Social movement is not at all same with the political movement. Political movement is separate, social movement is completely separate. There are two different movements, two different nature. One is social in nature, another is political in nature. Social movements are social in completely social in nature, and political movements are political in nature. Agitation, you know, social movements provides a possibility for articulation of grievances and problems. Social movements, why human beings require a social movement, why they desire for a social movement, कहीं की social movement संगठित होता. It provides a possibility for articulation of grievances, पुंजीभूत असंतोषर परिप्रकाश पाई एवं समस्यार समाधान पाई सोशल मूवमेंट आवश्यक होता. सोशल मूवमेंट ब्रिंग प्रेशर ऑन द स्टेट, कीप चेक ओवर द अथॉरिटी needed for healthy democracy. Social movement is a way of people's segments collective politics to express their aspirations and priorities. For the purpose of aspirations, to express
Excuse
aspirations.
me, sir.
Sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Sir.
A slide is not visible to students. Some students they are complaining. So can you again present? Click on present now button.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Sir. Sir, visual है लगी?
Yes, yes.
Sir.
Is it visible, students? Yes, sir. It's here. Yes, you can continue.
Sir. There is no one specific meaning of social movements. We have gone through the definitions of Herbert Bloomer, Doug McAdam. We could see the elements of social movement and its purpose, then its objectives. Social movements have 5 main components. Then we shall study the components of social movement. One is objectives. Secondly, it is ideology. Third one is programs. Fourth one is leadership. And fifth one is organization. Components of social movements. 5 main components: objectives, ideology, programs, leadership, and organization. Social movements are the spirit of democracy and dynamics of society. Social movements are spirit of democracy and dynamics of society. We could see the difference between social and political movement. What is social movement? What is political movement? Social movement involves any collective struggle aiming at bringing social transformation. Political movement, on the other hand, aims at the political transformation, the transformation of political regime, political order, or political system of a state. The difference between social and political movement is merely semantic. So, political movement and social movement are two different types and two different natures. Now we could see the components of social movements. One is objective. Objective of this social movement. First one is objective. Each and every social movement must have one objective. Objective means the goal it needed. Objective means प्रत्येक सामाजिक आंदोलन पाई निर्दिष्ट लक्ष्य और उद्देश्य रहिबा जरूरी आवश्यक। कारण लक्ष्य और उद्देश्य बिना कौनसी सामाजिक आंदोलन संगठित हो पारिबनी, सफल भी हो पारिबनी। तेणु objective is the first and foremost component of each and every social movement. So also there should be an ideological basis or background of a social movement. Social movement must have its ideological basis. आंदोलनर परिणाम स्वरूप नूतन आदर्शर सृष्टि करिबा सामाजिक आंदोलनर अन्यतम मौलिक लक्ष्य. प्रत्येक सामाजिक आंदोलन निर्दिष्ट लक्ष्य और मूल्यबोध उपरे पर्यवेसित. तेणु आदर्श सामाजिक आंदोलनर अन्यतम component. Third one is programs. It must have its process. It must have its programs. How to carry out the movement. Programs means the procedure of social movement. Movement procedure. How the movement can be organized and managed and progress to the logical end and to achieve the goal itself. Then comes another component of social movement is leadership. Leadership कारण कौनसी आंदोलन बिना नेतृत्व रे परिचालित हेई न थाए. तेणु सफल नेतृत्व आंदोलन को सफल करिवार अन्यतम भूमिका. तेणु प्रत्येक आंदोलन रे नेता थांती जे निष्पत्ति को कार्यकारी करंती, आंदोलन को मार्ग दर्शांती, तांकर आंदोलन को परिचालना करिवार दक्षता मध्य थाए. सामाजिक आंदोलन सेही भली नेतृत्व द्वारा परिचालित होई सफलता अर्जन करता. एवं लास्टली द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. विदाउट प्रॉपर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन सोशल मूवमेंट कैन नॉट last long. There should be proper organizational basis of each social movement so that social movement become successful in its path. Then social movements are of two types. One is extra constitutional, another is non institutional. One is extra constitutional, another is non institutional. Extra constitutional is also called direct action. Extra constitutional is also known as direct action. It is legally permitted. Extra constitutional system of social movement is legally permitted. It has no illegal activities, just like actions including petitioning, voting in election, fighting legal battles in the court of law. All these are extra constitutional means of social movement. According to Rajni Kothari, direct action can be defined as an extra constitutional political technique that takes the form of a group action, and it is aiming at some political change directed against the government in power. On the other hand, non-institutional path is known as an illegal path. It is illegal is not within the legal framework. Those who are in authority or support the status quo can interpret a particular action as illegal, but those who strive for social change may interpret the same action as legal. For violent means is illegal, therefore not permitted. The term extra-constitutional can be a matter of interpretation. Non-institutionalized collective action takes several forms, such as protest, agitation, strike, satyagraha, gherao, riot. These are the forms of social movement known as extra or non-institutional. Non-institutional. Extra-constitutional social movement is petitioning, voting in elections, fighting legal battles. These are extra-constitutional. Non-institutional is protest, agitation, strike, satyagraha, gherao. एगुड़ी सबू नॉन इंस्टीट्यूशनल बोली नॉन इंस्टीट्यूशनल सोशल मूवमेंट बोली कहा डिफरेंस बिटवीन एक्स्ट्रा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल सोशल मूवमेंट नॉन इंस्टीट्यूशनल सोशल मूवमेंट difference between political movement, difference between social movement. There are two differentiations. However, importance, many political thinkers, many political philosophers and leaders conceive the ideal political system and social order. They plead for a necessary and sometimes inevitably of social movements, including a revolutionary movement, to oppose the present political regime and this system, and to establish the system which they consider ideal and perfect, capable to resolve the problems of society. The chief aim is to solve or resolve the problems of society. If not peacefully, then it is through social movement. Establishment of a new social order or an ideal social order is the basic aim and objective of social movements. So, the term social movement is very important to every society. Social movements are the spirit of democracy and the dynamics of society. It started during the period of social unrest in the 18th century in England. It was traced from the social and political transformation in England, and there is then a number of social movements, and still it is occurring in each and every society. It has much more importance. It has to be studied with particular angle to learn, to study what is its implications. It is unit 1. Then we shall go for unit 2, approaches to study social movements, liberal, Gandhian and Marxian. Liberal, Gandhian and Marxian. 3 approaches. What is approach? Approach is otherwise known as theoretical prospect or method of study. What is approach? Approach to the study of social movement. The approach is otherwise known as theoretical prospect or method of study. There are different approaches to study social movements. Social and political processes are complex and have their own logic. Moreover, no approach is in pure form. There are variations among the followers of the same theoretical perspective. There are different perspectives among the Marxists and also among the liberals. There are different approaches, you could know, because the same movement can be construed and interpreted in many different ways. Why we study the different approaches? Why we go for different approaches to study social movements? Because social movements can be construed and interpreted in many different ways depending upon theoretical perspectives. From one which looks at the phenomena. Approach means a particular orientation, a particular point of view in looking at and interpreting the world of activity process. So, approach makes very easy to study the social movement because facts do not speak for themselves. The process never speak for themselves. The activities have to be collected, arranged, categorized, and interpreted. So that the approaches are of much more importance to study social movements. First of all is Marxian Marxist approach. Karl Marx, you know, a revolutionary political philosopher. He was primarily interested in bringing about revolutionary change in the society. You know, Karl Marx emphasizes the revolutionary change in society. According to Marxist approach, conflict is the central core of social movements. Conflict, dvandva, is the central core of social movements. There are different kinds of conflicts in society. There are different kinds of conflicts in society. Some conflicts are between individuals for personal power, style of functioning between the communities, social, ethnic, religious, regional, etc. On the other hand, conflicts are around material interest and domination of one over the others. You know, Karl Marx interprets the society from a material point of view. Karl Marx always looks at there are two classes in the society. One is bourgeois, another class is proletariats. One is half, another is half not. So the economic conflict of different classes belonging to separate communities take the form of ethnic conflict as Marx said. Economic conflict of different classes means class conflict is located in economic structure of the society. According to Karl Marx, class conflict is located in economic structure of the society, built in the production and distribution system. It is around domination and subjugation between the classes. One class who controls, who owns the means of production and distribution, subjugates, dominates the other class. That means in all forms of class society, specific form of production predominates, which influences other forms of social relations. Class domination can never be purely economic or purely cultural. It must always have a strong and pervasive political content, not least because the law is crystallized from which politics assumes in providing the necessary sanction and legitimation of all forms of domination. In this sense, politics sanctions what is permitted. That means those who own and control the means of production, समस्त उत्पाद गुड़िकर एवं समस्त द्रव्यर मालिका श्रेणी श्रमिक श्रेणी जहाँ से सर्वहरा श्रेणी बोली कहते आम सोसाइटी रे जुगे जुगे दुईटी श्रेणी सदा सर्वदा बसवास करती दुईटी श्रेणी फ्रॉम द इकोनॉमिक पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू गोटे श्रेणी पाखरे मालिकाना सत्व थाए आउ गोटे श्रेणी पाखरे किछि न थाए जहाँ से सर्वहरा बोली कहती ए दुईटी श्रेणी भितर सदा सर्वदा आर्थिक दृष्टिकोण कन्फ्लिक्ट ही कन्फ्लिक्ट लगी रही है. The former may be feudal lord or feudal system or industrial bourgeoisie in capitalist system. Antagonistic interests परस्पर विरोधी स्वार्थ ए दुईटा श्रेणी रे गोटे श्रेणी मालिका श्रेणी सदा सर्वदा चाहे अधिक रु अधिक धनी हो श्रमिक को शोषण करी संपत्ति ठूल करिवो दैट इज कॉल्ड the bourgeoisie in capitalist system. The former use the coercive as well as the persuasive power of the state. राष्ट्र सदा सर्वदा धनिक श्रेणीर स्वार्थ को सुरक्षा देई थाए बोली कार्ल मार्क्स कहती and also other institutions including religion, culture, education, mass media. All these always patronize the capitalist class. ये सबु गुड़िक केवल शोषण गोटे गोटे माध्यम एक्सप्लॉयटेशन. Then the proletariat class resist, protest, occasionally revolt or launch organized and collective action against the dominance of the popularized class. सर्वहरा श्रेणी कौन करती प्रतिरोध करती प्रतिवाद करती एवं विप्लव करती एवं हिंसात्मक विप्लव माध्यम रे सोशल पॉलिटिकल एंड इकोनॉमिक चेंज आनती overthrowing the dominant class in power. That is termed as social movement or social change. It is Marxist approach. Revolutionary change. Change of dominance class over the dominant class. In short, class struggle is the central driving force for resistance. Such collective actions take the form of social movements. According to Karl Marx, this sort of social movement, as described by Karl Marx, has a number of limitations. Because society cannot be interpreted in terms of economy only, as Marx says. It has number of angles. A society has a number of classes. Marx sees that only there are two classes. One is ownership class, another is the labor class, that is the proletariats. So this type of argumentation is partial, not at all universal. Then another approach is structural functional or structure function approach. What is the structure? What is function? Structure, function. Structure of social movement and function of social movement. All social movements have structures which can be identified, and that the parts or elements of these structures perform functions within the system. All social movements have structures which can be identified, and that the parts or elements of these structures perform functions within this system. Functionalism refers to behavior or phenomena that lead to fulfill particular functions for the system. You know, the scholars who adhere to the theory of political development consider that the rising aspirations of the people are not adequately met by existing political institutions, which are
Sir,
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 some students are complaining about the slides.
sir, it
Can
is
you
not
please?
visible only, sir.
Can you please do it again? Present now.
Sir, I have already shared you in WhatsApp. You can.
Oh yeah, it's okay. I have already shared, but some of the students they are complaining that slide is not visible. Actually, what is happening? Some students they are clicking on present now button. That is why that is disturbing to others. Kalpana, please off your video. Kalpana, please switch off your video. वीडियो बंद करो जो मैंने वीडियो ऑन कर वीडियो बंद करो प्रेजेंट नाउ बटन में कहीं क्लिक करोनी प्रेजेंट नाउ बटन ओनली फॉर काउंसलर तो बुझले ना स्मूथली चलिबो कल्पना स्विच अप योर वीडियो yes sir now it is okay
sir
is it okay students yes sir
asla sir
हाँ सर आसला पिलाମାନେ ମଝିରେ ଡିଷ୍ଟର୍ବ କରିଦଉଛନ୍ତି ଟିକେ ଆଉ କିଏ ଆସୁଛନ୍ତି ସେ ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟ ନା ବଟନରେ କ୍ଲିକ୍ କରିଦଉଛନ୍ତି ସେଟା ଆପଣଙ୍କର ଅଧା ପିଲାଙ୍କୁ ଦେଖାଯାଉଛି ଅଧା ପିଲା ଦେଖାଯାଉନି
ସେ ସମସ୍ୟା ହଉଛି
okay sir okay sir
structure function approach to the study of social change. We have studied first the Marxian approach to study of social change. Next we shall study structure function approach. All, what is structure function approach? All social movements have structures. प्रत्येक सामाजिक आंदोलन रो गोटे संगठन बा स्ट्रक्चर अछि, संरचना अछि, which can be identified, and that the parts or elements of these structures perform functions within the system. प्रत्येक संरचना बा स्ट्रक्चर रो पार्ट functions. Functionalism refers to behavior or a phenomena that lead to fulfill particular functions of the system. You could know what is structure function approach. What is structure and function approach to the study of social movement? The scholars who adhere to the theory of structure function approach of a political development or social movement consider that the rising aspirations of the people are not adequately met by existing political institutions, which is rigid or incompetent. अपारग शासन बा जनस्वार्थ विरोधी शासक माने जनसाधारण आशा आकांक्षा पूरण दिगरे व्यर्थ होता। As the gap between expectations of the people and performance of the system widens, जनसाधारण आशा बढ़ी जाउची एवं शासन शासन तंत्र से आशा को पूर्ण करिवारे व्यर्थ होची। जो गैप बिटवीन रूलर एंड रूल्ड paves the way for political instability and disorder, leading to mass upsurge सामूहिक आंदोलन रूप निये। रजनी कोठारी argues that direct action is inevitable in the context of present day political designs, political systems. The general climate of frustration, the ineffectiveness of known channels of communication, the alienation and automation of the individual, the tendency towards regimentation, and the continuous state of conflict between the ruler and the ruled render to build a social movement that is called the functional utility. Functional utility, even in a parliamentary form of government, also the redressal of grievances, frustrations, and wrongs may not be adequate so that a social movement take place. Another approach is there, important approach, you know, that is Gandhian approach. Mahatma Gandhi, you know, the leader of India's freedom movement, has a far-reaching influence on social movements in India during his lifetime and in the post-independent India also. Pre-independent India, post-independent India, also abroad. In South Africa, you know, Gandhi had organized and conducted a number of social movements against racial discrimination, particularly, you know, and succeeded. But Gandhi has not offered systematic analysis on social system, its functioning or causes of conflict. He was a critic of modernity Gandhi was a critic of modernity as developed in the West under Industrial Revolution. He was also against a capitalist economic system, and he had deep concern for the poor, poorest of the poor. Conflict in society, according to him, is not because of conflicting economic and social interests among the communities or classes. It is because of different understanding of interests and society, different moral and ethical values on good and evil, or prejudices against each other during his lifetime. He led struggles not only against the British rule but also racial discrimination in South Africa, against untouchability and discrimination to women. So, scholars of Gandhian approach consider that the rising aspirations of the people are not adequately met by existing institutions, which are rigid or incompetent. The method of resistance, as Gandhi has showed the way, is satyagraha, satya and agraha. Satya prati agraha. Satya means truth. Agraha means desire, insistence, holding firmly. This is perhaps the attitude of Gandhi to conduct a social movement. And this approach is otherwise regarded as Gandhian dialectic. Gandhian dialectic. Purity of means. Purity of means in social struggles and resolving conflict is the central concern of Gandhian ideology. Purity, Atma Suddhi, resolving conflict, Sahamati, and he preached ahimsa, non-violence, himsa virodhi. He says that truth is my religion. Truth is my religion, and ahimsa is the way to achieve it. ସତ୍ୟକୁ କେବଳ ଅହିଂସା ମାର୍ଗରେ ହିଁ ହାସଲ କରାଯାଇପାରିବ। ସତ୍ୟ ହେଉଛି ତାଙ୍କର ଧର୍ମ, ଅହିଂସା ଦ୍ୱାରା ସତ୍ୟକୁ ହାସଲ କରାଯାଇପାରିବ। ଗାନ୍ଧୀ ମତ ଦେଇଥିଲେ। Violence, he believed, was not only wrong, it was a mistake. And regarding untouchability, he said untouchability is a crime against God and mankind. Untouchability. Hindu society is hierarchical in nature. The people, the section of the people living or positioned in the lowest rung of the social ladder were untouchable by the upper three classes of persons of the society. Hindu समाज चारि वर्गर एवं सर्व शेष वर्ग को अछुआ चरित्र आख्या दिया जाता। या विरुद्ध रे महात्मा गांधी आंदोलन आरंभ करथिले सोशल इन नेचर। दैट मूवमेंट वाज आल्सो social in nature, and he succeeded. Mahatma Gandhi succeeded. That is called Gandhian approach to social movement. Another theory is there for social movement, resource mobilization theory. Resource mobilization theory. Resource mobilization theory is based on the assumption that individual actions motivated by goals that express their preferences. They act within the given constraints and available choices. Social movements for revolutionary changes by the marginal sections is out of impulse and emotion. Therefore, they do not sustain for long and fail. It was called resource mobilization. It was called resource mobilization. Social movements for revolutionary changes by marginal sections. Marginal sections means deprived sections. They bring about a revolution that is called social movement for a change out of impulse and emotion. It was called resource mobilization. It was called resource mobilization theory because the theory purported to show that the success of a movement depended on the sources available to be used. These resources arose from inducing individuals to participate and contribute to the cost. Individuals participate because they see the benefits to be derived from joining. ଯୋଗଦେଲେ କିଛି ମିଳିବ ଏ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ୟ ନେଇ ଯୋଗ ଦେଇଥାନ୍ତି କେବଳ କିଛି ପାଇବା ଆଶାରେ କିନ୍ତୁ ସର୍ବଶେଷରେ ତାହା ତିଷ୍ଠି ନଥାଏ ସେଭଳି ଆନ୍ଦୋଳନ ସାମାଜିକ ଆନ୍ଦୋଳନ ତିଷ୍ଠି ନଥାଏ ଏବଂ ବେଶୀ ଦୀର୍ଘସ୍ଥାୟୀ ମଧ୍ୟ ହୋଇନଥାଏ another resource mobilization theory reacts against the older view of social movements. It sees social movements are individually rational attempts to mobilize resources in pursuit of politics by other means. It tends to reproduce professional organizers' perspective. The theory emphasizes entrepreneurial skill of leaders for the movement. They mobilize resources. Resources are professional resources, financial resources, moral support resources, networking resources from outside to sustain their struggle. The leaders of the successful movements have skill to create organization and mobilize people. Rajendra Singh summarizes that social movements must be understood in terms of a conflict model of collective action. There is no basic difference between institutional and non-institutional collective action. There is no basic difference between institutional and non-institutional collective actions. Both institutional and non-institutional collective actions contain conflicts of interests built in the system. Social movements involve the rational pursuit of interest by competing groups. Goals and grievances, conflicts, constructions are inherently present in all relations of power, and as such, they themselves cannot explain the formation of social movements. The formation of social movements, therefore, is determined by the changes in resources, organization, and opportunities for collective action. Then another theory is relative deprivation theory. Relative deprivation theory. The theory of relative deprivation developed by American scholar Gore in 1970. Relative deprivation theory is that it is defined as actors' perception of discrepancy between their value expectations and their environment's apparent value capabilities. मूल्यबोध केते से दृष्टि value expectations are the goods and conditions of life to which people believe they are justifiably entitled. जनसाधारण से सबु द्रव्य उपरे तांकर हक रखती, and when they find that they are deprived of such entitlement, then the social movement takes place. They are the conditions that determine people's perceived chances of getting or keeping the values they legitimately expect to attain. आशा विफल होबा परे एवं निज हक रु सेमाने डिप्राइव होबा परे, डिप्राइवेशन थ्योरी, डिप्राइव होबा परे सोशल चेंज, सोशल मूवमेंट होइथा. You know, all these approaches are different sets for analysis. These approaches are of two types. One is classical approach or old approach. Marxian approach is classical approach or old approach. Other approaches are liberal approaches. So we could find out different approaches. Marxian approaches to the study of social movement, structural functional approaches, Gandhian approaches. Then two theories, resource mobilization theory, relative deprivation theory, to the study of social movements. It is all about unit 2. Then we shall study unit 3, classification of social movements, including new social movement. Classification of social movements, including new social movements. You know, classification जेते सामाजिक आंदोलन समग्र विश्व रे आरंभ ठारू आज पर्यंत देखा जायछि, सब गुडी को विभिन्न प्रकार भेद करा जायछि. कहा उपरे on the basis of scope, people, situation, necessity, यार ऊपर आधार करी विभिन्न वर्गीकरण प्रकार भेद करा जायछि. Scope based social movements may be revolt, rebellion and revolutionary. परिसर, scope means परिसर. सामाजिक आंदोलन गुडी को विभिन्न प्रकार भेद करा जायछि. ता ऊपर आधारित स्कोप बा परिसर आधार रे तीन प्रकार करा जायछि. रिफॉर्म बा संस्कार अभिमुखी, रिबेलियन बा तीव्र आंदोलन अभिमुखी, रिवोल्यूशनरी वैप्लविक अभिमुखी सामाजिक आंदोलन भाव. What is social movement? You know, social movement which aims at bringing certain changes in the system and not transforming the system completely is called reformist movement. Reformist movement. Reform माने संस्कार करा जीवो. Means समुदाय परिवर्तन एभली सामाजिक आंदोलन समुदाय परिवर्तन उपरे गुरुत्व रखे नाही. केवल केतेक परिवर्तन जहा निहाती आवश्यक सही परिवर्तन हासिल करने लक्ष्य रे सामाजिक आंदोलन अनुष्ठित होता है। एभली सामाजिक आंदोलन को संस्कार अभिमुखी सामाजिक आंदोलन बोली कहा जाए। संस्कार अभिमुखी संस्कार अर्थात द प्रेजेंट सिस्टम should be reformed. The present system should be reformed. A new order or a new system should be। संस्कार आंदोलन नीति नियम रे परिवर्तन दाबी करे माने system will continue but some of its nature, some of its functions will be changed। संस्कार आंदोलन नीति नियम रे परिवर्तन दाबी करे। उदाहरण स्वरूप इंस्टांसेस श्रमिक संगठन द्वारा श्रमिक मानक पाई अधिकार दाबी, परिवेश आंदोलन माध्यम रे परिवेश आईन दाबी करिबा, मृत्युदंड बा शारीरिक दंड प्रचलन पाई दाबी करिबा इत्यादि इत्यादि आंदोलन गुड़ी को संस्कार धर्मी सामाजिक आंदोलन बोली कहा जाए। संस्कार हम आदौ परिवर्तन हम ना किंतु त्रुटि विच्युतिर संशोधन है एक नुआ व्यवस्था सृष्टि करा जिवो। Another form of movement is rebellion movement. Rebellion movement aims at fundamental change of ideology. Fundamental change of ideology movement for individual right ideology. Movement for individual rights in America is an example for it. यही आंदोलन रिबेलियन मूवमेंट उग्र आंदोलन बोली कहा जाए ताकू। यही आंदोलन मौलिकता माध्यम रे मूल्यबोधर परिवर्तन दाबी करिथा है। मूल्यबोधर परिवर्तन दाबी करिथा है। अमेरिका रे व्यक्तिगत अधिकार पाई सृष्टि हेतिबा आंदोलन यार एक ज्वलंत उदाहरण होते। थर्ड वन इज रिवोल्यूशनरी मूवमेंट। Revolutionary movement refers to a movement where a section or sections of society launch an organized struggle to overthrow not only the established government but also the regime, but also the socio-economic structure which sustains it and replace the structure by an alternative social order। अर्थात विप्लवात्मक आंदोलन द्रुत प्रक्रिया रे सामाजिक संपर्क को परिवर्तन करे। यह द्वारा यार गोटे ज्वलंत उदाहरण दिया जीवो जो अक्टोबर विप्लव हेतिला 1917 मसीहा रे बल्शेविक आंदोलन रूसिया रे अनुष्ठित हेतिला। रूसिया शासक जार को परिवर्तन कर दिया जायतिला, गादीच्युत करा जायतिला। अर्थात शासनर आमूलचूल परिवर्तन हेउची एभली विप्लवात्मक आंदोलनर चरित्र। ठीक से भली आड़ी आंदोलन नक्सलाइट मूवमेंट इट इज ए रिवोल्यूशनरी मूवमेंट। देन न्यू सोशल movements। Social movements new in Europe after 1960s 1960 दशक परे peace movement, ecological movement, women's movement etc. are called new social movement। In India the movements around the issue of identity दलित आंदोलन, आदिवासी आंदोलन, नारी आंदोलन, मानविक अधिकार आंदोलन एवं परिवेश सुरक्षा आंदोलन are also labeled as the new social movements। Traditional movement and new issue based movements. New means new issue based movements. What is the issue? दलित अधिकार, आदिवासी अधिकार, नारी मानकर अधिकार, मानव अधिकार, सुरक्षा अधिकार एवं परिवेश एगुड़िक हूँ इश्यू बेस्ड. In one sense they are called new social movements because they have raised the issues related to identity and autonomy. Why it is new? It is defined. Because they have raised the issues related to identity and autonomy, which are non-class issues and do not confront with the state. सरकार सहित कौन द्वंद्व एथिरे नाही. Rather, they are the new forms of social movement. नूतन रूपर आंदोलन को नुआ सामाजिक आंदोलन बोली कहा. नूतन रूपर आंदोलन दलित अधिकार पाई, आदिवासी अधिकार एगुड़ा सब आगुरी नथिला. इश्यू बेस्ड मूवमेंट structure function approach classifies social movements. Structure function approach classifies social movements on the basis of issues around which people are mobilized. People do get mobilized around the number of issues from local and immediate to systematic and long term. They vary from time to time and from society to society. The characteristics of new social movements. The characteristics. Firstly, the new social movements. NSM, new social movements. To state power. राष्ट्र एवं राष्ट्र सरकार विरोध रे एभली सामाजिक आंदोलन कौन कार्यक्रम नहीं. They are concerned with the individual and collective morality. Secondly, the new social movements are not class based, they are multi-class. In fact, they don't subscribe to the theory that society is divided on class line and the classes are antagonistic. Ideologies of farmers movement thus provided a clear challenge to the Marxism that limited its analysis only to capital labor struggles as defined with a realm of commodity exchange. Thirdly, the new social movements are confined to and concerned with civil society. According to the proponents of new social movements, civil society is getting diminished. Its social space is suffering a shrinkage and the social of the civil society is eroded by the controlling ability of the state. As such, new social movements raise the issue of the self-defense of community and civil society. Fourthly, new social movements are not around economic issues of land, wages, or property. Fifthly, new social movements are not concerned for the benefits of one class or group. And lastly, new social movements are grassroots or micro movements and do not have to capture state power on their agenda. Classification by social categories. Social movements. Classification by social categories. Sometimes social categories are divided by region, such as urban, rural. Urban means शहरी एवं ग्रामांचल. शहरांचल, ग्रामांचल. Movements may also be classified on economic as well as ethnic categories and also by issues together. Some others classify movements on the basis of the participants, such as peasants movement, tribals movement, students movement, women movement, Dalit movement. In many cases, the participants or issues go together. Participant and issues go together. It is all about Unit 3, then Unit 4. Unit 4, democratization and changing nature of Indian society. Democratization and changing nature of Indian society. Social movements in British India questioned the caste system. Social movement, Free India is a democratic republic one. Free India is a democratic republic one. Still, political participation was constrained by social and economic inequalities in India. जदिओ भारत स्वाधीन भारत हेउचे एक गणतांत्रिक साधारणतंत्र तथापि पॉलिटिकल पार्टिसिपेशन समस्त जनसाधारण सम दृष्टि राजनैतिक प्रक्रिया रे अंश ग्रहण करने संभव हेउनाही ड्यू टू सामाजिक एवं अर्थनैतिक असमानता जोगु. Indian society is hierarchical structure. Discrimination, variation in free India also. In spite of positive development, India still has to contend with much poverty, with mass poverty, illiteracy, communal violence, and atrocities against women. In pre-independence arena, particularly social movements in British India questioned the caste system. And caste-based inequality. ब्रिटिश शासन समय भारत रे जाति प्रथा अत्यंत तीव्र होता. विशेष करी भारतीय समाज रे सर्वनिम्न श्रेणीर लोके अत्यंत डिस्क्रिमिनेशन पातर अंतर सामाजिक आर्थिक दृष्टि होते. से दृष्टि एभली कास्ट सिस्टम को संपूर्ण रूपे निराकरण करने देयर आर नंबर ऑफ मूवमेंट्स, सोशल मूवमेंट्स. सच मूवमेंट्स लेड बाय ज्योतिबा फुले इन महाराष्ट्र and Sri Narayana Guru in Kerala. Gandhi made abolition of untouchability an integral part of the freedom movement. महात्मा गांधी से हरिजन पदयात्रा करथिले. छुआ छुआ भेदभाव को संपूर्ण रूपे विरोध करथिले. He made efforts to make the upper castes realize the enormity of injustice, social injustice, political injustice, economic injustice done through the practice of untouchability. जो छुआ अछुआ भेदभाव रही ता द्वारा अपर कास्ट माने अनुभव करवा उचित जे किभली अन्याय निम्न वर्गर जनसाधारण प्रति करा जाउची समाज करूची ए संपर्क रे गांधीजी एक दृढ़ सामाजिक आंदोलन गढ़ी तोड़िथिले स्वाधीनता आंदोलन परिचालना माध्यम रे traditionally the role and position of a the traditionally in Indian society the role and position of a wife or a mother was low in family. Indian society is patriarchal in nature. पुरुष प्रधान समाज नारी मानकर से समय रे ब्रिटिश इंडिया रे कौनसी आईनगत राजनैतिक एवं अर्थनैतिक अधिकार आदौ नथिला. Prevalence of practices like polygamy, बहुपत्निक, पुरोधा, child marriage, the custom of sati undermined women position in the society. Hindu women had no right to inherit property, while Muslim women could inherit only half as much as a man could. The social reform movement all over the country had a common theme, and it was improvement in the condition of women. से समय रे समाज रे बहु प्रकारर सामाजिक आंदोलन होइथिला. नारी आंदोलन होइथिला, दलित आंदोलन होइथिला, हरिजन आंदोलन होइथिला. एभली सामाजिक असमानता को दूरेया पई या थिला इंडियन सोसाइटी रो परिचय ब्रिटिश समय रे एवं स्वाधीन भारत रे मध्य जदियो आम संविधान भारत को एक साधारण तंत्र बा गणतंत्र एवं गणतांत्रिक राष्ट्र रूपे घोषणा करिछि. सेथिपाई विभिन्न एकता एवं समानता न्यायर व्यवस्था मान आईनगत सांविधानिक व्यवस्था मान करिछि. ता सहित DPSP chapter 4 of the Indian Constitution रे directive principles of state policy रे chapter 3 रे थिबा a set of fundamental rights रे right to equality, right to freedom, all these rights have given enough opportunity to establish a just full society and a society with justice to each, a society with equal status, with equal opportunity to all. करिछि. तथापि it is not possible to establish such type of society as the constitution wants to see due to mass poverty. Mass, though not mass, a sort of illiteracy existing in our society due to communal violence, atrocities, and all these things. The acute caste system, untouchability still persists in the Indian society. There are a number of reforms in the pre-independence era. Swami Vivekananda, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, Raja Rammohn Rai had reformed the society towards a just, full, and towards an equality-based society. Still, it has not been practicable till today 100%. So that our society must be a social change and must be an equality based society from economic angle, from social angle, from political angle also. The independent India, though has progressed a lot, still it has to go a long way to establish an egalitarian society and to eradicate all such ill practices, all such superstitions, କୁସଂସ୍କାର ସବୁ ଯଦିଓ ସତୀଦାହ ପ୍ରଥା ଲୋପ ପାଇଛି ଏବେ ବି ଚାଇଲ୍ଡ ମ୍ୟାରେଜ ଚାଲୁଛି ଏବେ ବି ଶିଶୁ ଶ୍ରମିକ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ଏବେ ବି କେଉଁଠି କେଉଁଠି ସତୀଦାହ ପ୍ରଥା ଅଛି କେଉଁଠି କେଉଁଠି ପଲିଗାମୀ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅଛି ବା ବହୁ ପତ୍ନୀକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ମଧ୍ୟ ଅଛି ନାରୀମାନେ ଯଦିଓ ସଶକ୍ତ ହେଲେଣି ଏମ୍ପାୱାର୍ଡ ହେଲେଣି ଇକୋନୋମିକାଲି socially constitutionally legally and educational point of view तथापि a number of section must have to go a long way to achieve their rights by their own effort. There were a number of popular movements, you know, in the post independent India and the Indian society had faced remarkable changes in the system. You know, backward class and Dalits, Harijan, Adivasi, they form a, though not major, still a section of the Indian society are yet to come to the mainstream means they have to be at the same status and position in our society in terms of economic, social and political justice. Otherwise, Indian society cannot achieve as desired, as it is found in Western societies. The Western society is the society of liberty, is the society of empowerment of each and every individual and empowerment of each and every section with equality in nature. India has established democracy, you know, a responsible government, a government with the constitutional sanctions, a government with legal framework and a government with certain program to change the Indian society. You know, there were planning in India. There is also planning in India, 5-year plans, first 5-year plan, second 5-year plan, third 5-year plan. All these aim at to transform the Indian society into a financially and economic sound society so that the Indian society can be at large a new society based on social justice and equality. Then unit idea of social transformation has met the halfway in Indian society. Backward class and Dalits challenge to the dominance of upper caste. The introduction of the universal adult franchise, periodic elections, and of democratic consciousness led to forward caste dominance being challenged by the first, the middle castes, and then by the Dalits. Capturing power by the OBCs, other backward castes, and the Dalits appear to be a panacea for the inequalities of status and income inbuilt into the caste system in India. Lalu Yadav, in Bihar came to power by giving the slogan, smash the upper castes. The prime concern of the leaders from these groups are gaining government positions. Similarly, BSP used slogans like vote C, lens PM, CM, Arakshan, say SP, DOM. State democracy and change, caste, the rise of the other backward caste movement and Dalit movement has challenged the upper caste dominance. The complexion of national parliament and the state assemblies has changed with more and more MPs and MLAs from the backward castes and Dalitas. The demand to implement the reservation policy was not just for some jobs to employed youth from these sections of society, but also for the crucial role they play in delivery of public funds. When Mayawati became chief minister in Uttar Pradesh, she replaced upper caste officials holding key posts like chief secretary, CM's private secretary with scheduled caste officers. The same thing happened in Bihar with Lalu Yadav rise in power, where the upper caste officers were replaced by those belonging to OBC. Yeah. The reservation of seats in Panchayat Raj institutions, PRI, Panchayat Raj institutions, PRIs, for SCs, STs, and women provided by 73rd Amendment to the Constitution. 73तम संविधान संशोधन रे बଳରେ पंचायत राज संस्था गुडी को सांविधानिक सरकार मान्यता दिया जाइथिला एवं सेथिरे समस्त संरक्षण व्यवस्था कराइथिला जहा कि पार्लियामेंट एवं राज्य विधानसभा गुडी को पई प्रयुज्य थिला. Gender, dramatic changes have taken place in the status of women since independence. The Constitution promised complete equality to women. Women, like men, also got the right to vote. Once Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, the ex-Prime Minister of India had told, women is a weaker man. Woman is a weaker man in physical construction, but mentally and positionally same as with the male. Gender, women like men also got right to vote. B.R. Ambedkar, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, the law minister after independence, submitted a bill that raised the age of consent and marriage, upheld monogamy, gave women right to divorce, maintenance and inheritance, and treated dowry as stridhan or women's property. This bill faced steep opposition from the conservative sections of the society. The bill had to be postponed because of this Finally, important sections of the bill got passed in 4 separate acts: the Hindu Marriage Act, the Hindu Succession Act, the Hindu Minority Act, the Guardianship Act, and the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act. The extension of legal rights to Hindu women was not sufficient, but it was definitely a bold step. This can be gauged from the stiff opposition faced by the government while extending the same legal rights to women from other religious communities. In 1985, the Supreme Court granted a petience to Saif Banu, a divorced Muslim woman. The conservatives among Muslim community created so much of furor in the name of interference in their Muslim personal law. ଏଭଳି ରକ୍ଷଣଶୀଳ ସମାଜ ମୁସଲମାନ ମାନଙ୍କର ହିନ୍ଦୁ ମାନଙ୍କର ଅଛି ଯେଉଁଠି ସ୍ତ୍ରୀ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ପୁରୁଷ ତୁଳନାରେ ସମ ଅଧିକାର ପ୍ରଦାନରେ ସେମାନେ ବାଧା ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରି ଏବେ ବି ଚାଲିଛନ୍ତି। Liberalization, poverty and social change. Although the major Indian political parties contrive to mobilize poor on the basis of community and not class, this does not mean that economic differentiation has ceased to be a criteria to understand Indian politics. Except in Kerala and West Bengal, the unorganized majority of the poor peasantry, agricultural laborer, artisans, and workers in informal sectors have become dependent on social welfare programs sponsored by the central government. Even the redistributional programs introduced by the early 1970s at the height of the Garib Hatao campaign by the government led by ex-Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, Garib Hatao, could not make any significant progress or impact because of lack of commitment in the commitment. The middle class is going to proliferate because of the proliferation of the service sectors and white collar jobs. There is a fear that it may further aggravate the condition of rural and urban poor. The Indian state has been ineffective in creating human base for development. The lack of basic education, gender rights, health facilities, and employment opportunities for a big chunk of the population does not go well with the goal of economic justice. Marginalized groups who are not organized and not in a position to pressurize the state to fulfill its welfare commitments. Human Development Index and the reality. Human Development, मानव संबलर विकास बा मानव विकास रो इंडेक्स सूची एवं वास्तवता, मानव विकास रो सूची एवं वास्तवता. You know, social and economic development in India is marred with wide prevalence of poverty. भारत रे poverty बा दारिद्रता एक अभिशाप भाव रे एबे भी प्रतिष्ठित हेकरी अछि. So also inequality, social injustice and poor quality of life are the characters of Indian life. भारतीय समाज रे दारिद्रता जे भली राजनीति करूची, ठीक से भली असमानता, सामाजिक अन्याय एवं अति दयनीय जीवन शैली एबे भी राजनीति करू। Despite remarkable achievements on the front of economic growth and political democracy, India has entered the 21st century with low per capita income. Per capita income means मुंड पिछा आय समग्र पृथ्वी रे सर्वनिम्न नहेले भी बहु परिमाण रे कम मुंड पिछा आयर राष्ट्र भाव रे भारतर परिस्थिति एबे भी अछि। इनटॉलरेबली लो लेवल ऑफ लिटरेसी एबे भी निरक्षरता भारतीय समाज रे अछि and a very low position on the world index of human resource development मानव संबल विकास सूची रे समग्र विश्व रे बहु पछरे पड़ी भारत। In the early 60s, the planning commission formulated the concept of poverty line. Below this line were people whose consumption, especially of food grains, did not come up to a minimum level in terms of calories. जणे मनुष्य बंचिबा पाई जेउ परिमाणर एवं जेउ तत्वर खाद्य आवश्यक न्यूट्रिशनल फूड नथिबा जहाकू कैलोरी बोली कहा जाए शक्ति खाद्य शक्ति कैलोरी बेस्ड फूड भारतीय माने जहा आवश्यक पांति नाही सामूहिक भाव रे केतक पांति सामूहिक भाव रे पांति नाही। In 1971 nearly 59% of the population was living BPL below poverty line. Since then, poverty has been registering a steady decline. In 1994, it stood at 36%, nearly 3 million people, equal to the population of India at the time of independence. स्वाधीनता हासिल बेले जेतिकी जनसाधारण थिले सही परिमाणर जनसाधारण आजिर दिन रे still below poverty line. Another fact about poverty is that it varies from area to area. In Bihar, nearly 63% people are below poverty line. बिहार रे सर्वाधिक गरीब लोक बसवास करती से मानकर परिमाण होची 100 रु 63 जन 63%. Despite a number of anti-poverty programs, be it community development program, be it integrated rural development program, be it economic rehabilitation of rural poor by Odisha government, still main burnt poverty is borne by poor peasants, agricultural laborers and urban poor. The anti-poverty programs launched by the government failed due to rampant corruption. The problem of poverty is further compounded by the existence of glaring social and economic inequality. While the poor have not become poor, or actually they have benefited from economic growth, the gap between the poor and the rich, this is most important issue. The gap between poor section of the people and the rich section of the people is being widened डे बाय डे दिनकू दिन धनी गरीब भितर थिबा पार्थक्य बा तारतम्य बा दूरता क्रमे वृद्धि पाई चली इट हैज ए increasing graph line, you know, it is widened further in the age of liberalization. The fruits of development have been and are being disproportionately cornered by the upper and middle class. लुटी नौचंती समाने upper class, middle class. In the latest index of human development compiled by the United Nations Development Program UNDP in 1999, India was ranked 132 out of 147 countries. विश्वर 147 राष्ट्र मध्य भारतर स्थान 132 रे थिला ड्यू टू लो ह्यूमन इंडेक्स development as compiled by UNDP. Life expectancy at birth, infant mortality rate, literacy among other things have been taken into account while compiling. A comparison of the record of colonial period with the post-independent period makes us realize that India's achievements have been creditable, but a comparison with even our neighboring countries reveal that we are lagging far behind them in regard to these important areas. An Indian life expectancy at the time of birth was 32 years in 1950. It went up to 63 years in 1998, which seemed to be quite impressive, but it was 69.8 years in 73. And in China and Sri Lanka, respectively, infant mortality rate 100 lives birth which 227 प्रति 1000 जन्म 227 शिशु मृत्युवरण करुचंती. A tangible outcome of the democratic process launched in India after independence clearly seems to be that it has succeeded in giving a choice to the marginalized. Around the middle of 1990s, there has been an upsurge in political organizations and electoral participation of the disadvantaged groups. The Congress Party, which shied away from giving proper representation to the disadvantaged, is facing routes in many parts of the country. New parties have tried to correct an imbalance in representation. This social bloc has the potential of denying the gains from the democratic upsurge of the lower caste. The BJP government to India as a Hindu nation has led to redefinition of Indian nationalism by giving a distorted meaning to secularism. It is backward looking and upper caste dominated and seems very appealing to the elite and educated Indians whose interest is threatened by popular movements and lower caste assertions. This is the Human Development Index in reality. In reality. Then Unit 5, Globalization and Social Movement. Unit 5, Globalization and Social Movements. What is globalization? You know, Jagatikkarana by globalization is nothing but a market-based economic system. Globalization is nothing but a market-based economic system. You know, globalization has brought profound transformation in the lives of people everywhere and it has immense potential to affect social, political and economic conditions globally. An important aspect of globalization is state-led, centralized, and planned economic development being replaced with market-led, liberalized, and globalized economic development. Market is projected as a panacea of all the economic evils. The expansion of market is among the instruments that can help to promote human capabilities. And given the need of eliminating endemic deprivation in a state, states seem to be on the retreat. Even in India, the state-centric developmental approach has come in for sharp criticism. The central role assigned to state and its bureaucracy in developmental projects has precluded participation of masses and local people in solving their problems. The movement of international capital along with expansion of information technology have resulted in the erosion of the boundaries and sovereignty of nation states. This void caused by retreating state necessities a dialogue between globalization and social movements. Social movements have succeeded in conveying a message clearly that any developmental paradigm not providing for their participation will not be acceptable to them. In India, initial doubts and apprehensions about globalization seem to have waned. Impact of globalization until 1980s, many of the developing countries pursued inward-oriented growth strategies, relied heavily on state-owned enterprises, and had highly protected and regulated economies. 1980 ମସିହା ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ସମଗ୍ର ବିଶ୍ୱରେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରମାନେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ମାଲିକାନାରେ ପରିଚାଳିତ ଶିଳ୍ପ କଳକାରଖାନା ଉଦ୍ୟୋଗ ପ୍ରତିଷ୍ଠାନ ଦ୍ୱାରା ନିଜର ଅର୍ଥନୀତିକୁ ପରିଚାଳନା କରୁଥିଲେ ଏବଂ ନିୟନ୍ତ୍ରଣ କରୁଥିଲେ ଆର୍ଥିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଏବଂ ସମଗ୍ର ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରକୁ ଗୋଟିଏ ଅର୍ଥନୀତି ଭାବରେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରାଯାଉଥିଲା. Each state was regarded as one economic system. State is recognized as one economic system. Indian economy was not an exception to this global pattern. Before globalization, India had adopted mixed economic system. Mixed मिश्रित अर्थनैतिक व्यवस्था. 50% on the public ownership entrepreneurship, 50% private ownership entrepreneurs. India had promulgated this type of fiscal policy, economic policy. ଅଧା ସରକାରୀ ମାଲିକାନାରେ ଏବଂ ଅଧା ଘରୋଇ ମାଲିକାନାରେ କଳକାରଖାନା ପ୍ରତିଷ୍ଠା କରି ଅର୍ଥନୀତିକୁ ପରିଚାଳନା କରିବା ଭାରତ ସରକାରଙ୍କର ଭାରତର ଅର୍ଥନୀତି ଥିଲା ଜଗତୀକରଣ ପୂର୍ବରୁ. But a combination, the 1990s saw these countries launched on the path of privatization, liberalization, and deregulation. India was also one of these countries. India in the year 1991 1991 ମସିହାରେ ଭାରତ ଜଗତୀକରଣ ଅର୍ଥନୈତିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥାକୁ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିନେଇଥିଲା। ଜଗତୀକରଣ ହେଉଛି ଏକ ସମଗ୍ର ବିଶ୍ୱବ୍ୟାପୀ ଅର୍ଥନୈତିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଯାହାକି ମିଳିତ ଜାତିସଂଘର WTO वर्ल्ड ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन द्वारा परिचालित होता है। अर्थात मिलित जातिसंघर WTO बा वर्ल्ड ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन समग्र विश्व को गोटे अर्थनैतिक व्यवस्था भावे परिचालना करुची, सृष्टि भी करिथिला एवं परिचालना भी करुची। आउ राष्ट्र मानकर स्थिति होची राष्ट्र माने जो राष्ट्र जगतीकरण प्रक्रिया को ग्रहण कर प्रत्येक राष्ट्र समग्र विश्व अर्थनीतिर एक अंशीदार मात्र हेई रहिसंती। निजर कठोर अर्थनैतिक कटकणा को से माने उठाई देई घरोईकरण, उदारीकरण एवं मार्केट बजारकरण चरित्र रे निज अर्थनीति को ग्रहण कर घरोईकरण जो गुड़िक सरकारी उद्योग रे प्रतिष्ठित होता से गुड़िक कालक्रमे पर्यायक्रमे घरोई प्राइवेटाइजेशन करागला। बिकॉज इन इंडिया यू नो इंडिया आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस had invested a huge capital in the state-owned enterprises and expected that these state-owned enterprises will contribute a lot annually to the state exchequer, राष्ट्रीय अर्थनीति प्रति सरकारी उद्यम रे प्रतिष्ठित कलकारखाना गुड़िक विपुल पुंजी निवेश माध्यम रे सृष्टि होइथिबा सरकारी कलकारखाना गुड़िक बहु परिमाण रे निजर अवदान रखिबे राष्ट्रीय अर्थनीति प्रति। मात्र यह देखा गला जे समग्र जो कलकारखाना गुड़िक सरकारी मालिकाना रे प्रतिष्ठा कराइथिला से गुड़िक क्षति रे चालुथुला, प्रति वर्ष क्षति रे चालुथुला एवं भारत सरकार जेहेतु विपुल परिमाण रे पुंजी निवेश करथिले से भली कलकारखाना रे भारत सरकार से गुडी को बंचे रखिया पई इन रिटर्न जो थ्रु आय आशा करथिले सेठी किछि परिमाण रो अर्थ प्रति वर्ष सरकार निज राजकोषरु से गुडी को बंचे रखिया पई जोथिले। दैट मीन्स the government owned, the public owned enterprises in India were in loss, were a burden, were liabilities to the state exchequer. राजकोष प्रति से गुडी को बोझ ही पड़िथिला due to mismanagement and huge corruption and lack of sincerity, so that government had no option but to privatize them. And after adopting the world economic system globalization process in 1991, India privatized its entrepreneurs where there was a huge loss. India, you know, a combination of factors, both international and national, influenced India to take a decision to follow globalization, and India adopted a new economic policy in the year 1991, a new economic policy. India was faced with the severe depletion of foreign exchange reserve ratio. Foreign exchange reserve ratio. There was not enough foreign exchange reserve even to pay for imports of for 2 months. The country was left with no option but to approach the World Bank, IMF, International Monetary Fund, for loans to avert the crisis. You know, the globalization process is managed by the WTO, World Trade Organization, and WTO has two world-based financial institutions, ମିଳିତ ଜାତିସଂଘର ବିଶ୍ୱ ବାଣିଜ୍ୟ ସଂସ୍ଥା ଅଙ୍ଗର ଦୁଇଟି ଆର୍ଥିକ ପ୍ରତିଷ୍ଠାନ ବିଶ୍ୱରେ ରହିଛି। ଗୋଟିଏ ହେଉଛି ଇଣ୍ଟରନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ମନିଟାରୀ ଫଣ୍ଡ, ଆଉ ଗୋଟିଏ ହେଉଛି ଦି ୱାର୍ଲଡ ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କ। ଭାରତ ସରକାର 1991 ମସିହାରେ ଜଗତୀକରଣ ପ୍ରକ୍ରିୟାକୁ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଆର୍ଥିକ ଦେବାଳିଆ ପରିସ୍ଥିତିର ଶିକାର ଥିଲେ। ଦେବାଳିଆ ମିନ୍ସ ଋଣ ଆଣି ପରିଶୋଧ କରି ନ ପାରିବାର କ୍ଷମତା ଥିବା ବା ଅବସ୍ଥା ଥିବା ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିକୁ ଦେବାଳିଆ ବା ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କରପ୍ସି ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଇଥାଏ। ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ in 1990 faced this type of situation. In order to tackle the situation, Indian government approached the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank to sanction fresh loans, fresh foreign capital, foreign currency to meet the situation. To avail these loans, the country had to agree to a package of stabilization and a structural adjustment program. This package gave the much needed boost to the process of economic liberalization in India. This gave an opportunity to the reform-oriented bureaucracy inside the government and go ahead with their long-cherished agenda. The impending financial collapse harmed of the resolve to reform at the government level. The ideological opposition to the policy of reforms appeared to be weakest around the economic policy. Margaret Thatcher in England and Ronald Reagan in America represented what came to be known as rolling back the state. So Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate for economics, is of the view that government policy at this time seems to be overwhelmingly concerned with removing counterproductive regulations. The state has been neglecting positive activities earlier also and continues to do so even now. Globalization, social movements and developing countries. In India, social movements have played an important role both before and after independence. Globalization seems to be throwing never challenges before social movements. In the era of globalization, social movements all over the world have been active in ameliorating the conditions of the people by launching movements against both democratic and undemocratic states. Some movements have taken advantage of the opportunities offered by globalization for creating international networks. At the same time, some movements have been busy fighting the negative effects of globalization. Charles Oman holds that the challenge before globalization is that it should strengthen social cohesion, not weaken it. The policies of the organizations are determined by richest industrial countries, which are the members of the Group of Seven. To Together, these countries control over 60% of the world economic output, over 70% of the world trade. The report of the South Commission in 1992 held that inequalities tended to widen as the economy grew and became more industrialized. The gap of income, knowledge and power is growing, and a large segment of the population experienced no significant improvement in their standard of living. The economic management by the three organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the WTO, World Trade Organization, has caused massive reorganization in the economy and society in developing countries. Globalization, in a sense, has meant narrowing the policy options for the countries of the South. These also seem to be undermining their sovereignty. South means the poor countries. South means the developing countries. South refers to those nation states which are poor in terms of their economic capability. South पृथ्वीर गरीब एवं विकासशील राष्ट्र गुड़ी को साउथ बोली संबोधन करा जाउची इंटरनेशनल टर्मिनोलॉजी। ठीक से भली पृथ्वीर विकसित राष्ट्र मानन को नॉर्थ बोली संबोधन करा जाउची। तेणु धनी आउ गरीब राष्ट्र मध्य पार्थक्य जगतीकरण पूर्व बहु मात्रा थिला, एबे भी सेही भली मात्रा रे रही छी। तो जगतीकरण धनी राष्ट्र मानकर स्वार्थ को साधन करिया पई उद्दिष्ट बोली गरीब राष्ट्र माने सदा सर्वदा जुक्ति उपस्थापन करि आसुचंती। Globalization and social movements in India. Globalization is likely to have serious implications for Indian agriculture. India signed the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade (GATT) at Maracas in 1994 and became part of the World Trade Organization. As part of the GATT agreement, developing countries including India are under obligation to introduce reduction in subsidies and keep it to the 10% of farmers' value output. Subsidy व्यवस्था को कालक्रमे उच्छेद करिवा पाई गाट चुक्तिनामा रे शर्त सबु रहिछि। इंडिया जेहेतु से चुक्तिर गोटे पक्ष, गाट द्वारा प्रणीत आर्थिक व्यवस्थार नीति नियम गुड़ी को भारत सरकार ग्रहण करिबा एवं कार्य रे उपयोग करिया को बाध्य एवं करिछि मध्य। GATT is the prior institution of WTO. Before formation of WTO, there was GATT General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. After GATT, a new system, formal system of world economy was created, and the institution named WTO came into existence, and GATT was concluded. GATT WTO रो प्रथम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन GATT परे WTO सृष्टि हला। GATT को परिसमाप्ति कर दिया गला। Another GATT related problem affecting the interest of the farmers is the introduction of patenting in agriculture. A farmer is not automatically permitted to use seeds of the protected varieties, which is saved for sowing next crop. he has either to pay compensation for the use of seeds saved by him or to obtain permission of the breeder, as most of the plant breeders are multinational corporations and their main motive is profit. The only option left with the farmers is to buy the seeds again. Farmers in Karnataka had registered their protest. This is the social movement, outcome of the globalization. Outcome of the globalization. GATTର ଅନ୍ୟତମ ସର୍ତ୍ତ ଥିଲା ଯେଉଁ କୃଷକମାନେ ଏକ ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ଧରଣର ମଞ୍ଜି ବା ସିଡ୍ ଉତ୍ପାଦନ କରିଥିବେ, ଅଧିକ ଅମଳକ୍ଷମ ଗୁଣାତ୍ମକ ଅମଳକ୍ଷମ ସିଡ୍ ଉତ୍ପାଦନ କରିଥିବେ, ସେମାନେ ତାର ସବୁଦିନ ପାଇଁ ମାଲିକ ହୋଇ ରହିବେ। अन्य फार्मर माने जदि से भली सीड को व्यवहार करती ताहले मूल मालिक को किछि परिमाणर अर्थ दबा को ही पड़िबो। या विरुद्ध रे या थिला जगतीकरणर एक दुर्बल बा शोषणकारी व्यवस्था। केउ माने उन्नत धरण बा उन्नत किस्मर बिहन उत्पादन करथिले से माने होचंती मल्टी national corporations, multinational corporation, बहुराष्ट्रीय कॉर्पोरेशन माने जेउ गुड़िकर मालिक जेउ कॉर्पोरेशन मालिक थिले विकसित स्वल्प संख्यक विकसित राष्ट्रर धनिक श्रेणीर व्यक्ति, अर्थात गरीब राष्ट्रर कृषक मानकर आय धनिक श्रेणी मानक द्वारा धनिक श्रेणी राष्ट्र मानकर धनिक व्यक्ति मानक द्वारा परिचालित मल्टीनेशनल कॉर्पोरेशन निकट को चली जाता। यह थिला एक शोषण व्यवस्था। तेणु फार्मर्स इन कर्नाटक had registered their protest against this arrangement by attacking the farm of Cargill Seeds, a multinational seed company. The farmers have been joined by the NGO in their protest against the seed companies. Liberalizing agricultural sector seems to be more contentious. A jump in food prices appears to be an inevitable outcome of liberalization. This fear has a solid basis. The international prices of food grains are higher than domestic prices. Any rise in food prices would hit the poor hardly. This would make the government of the day immensely unpopular and might seriously jeopardize the electoral fortunes of the ruling party.
jeopardize sir kon
jeopardize माने सेमानंकर राजनैतिक स्टेबिलिटी को विपद रे पकेइबा बा संपूर्ण भाव रे विध्वंस करिबा। jeopardize माने डेंजरस। Overall, the response of the rich farmers movement towards the new economic policy and India joining the WTO has not been undifferentiated. Sharad Joshi, an important leader of farmers in the western part of the country, has welcomed a new development. So there are number of social movements as the outcome of globalization. Working class, globalization thrown big challenges before the working class movement. An important part of the globalization agenda has been privatization of public sector units in India. Privatization. Privatization is otherwise known as withdrawal of capital. पुंजी प्रत्याहार बा घरोईकरण एका कथा। सरकार विपुल परिमाणर पुंजी निवेश करथिले घरोई सरकारी मालिकाना रे प्रतिष्ठित कल कारखाना उद्योग रे, सेथिरु से पुंजी गुडी को प्रत्याहार कर देले बा घरोई मालिकाना को दे देले। which has meant disinvestment, punji pratyahara, and privatization of the public sector. Among the main planks of the new economic policy are closure of sick and loss making public enterprise. जो गुड़िक दुर्बल अच्छी बा क्षति चलुची से भली कलकारखाना ठारू पुंजी प्रत्याहार करी घरोई मालिकाना को टेकी दिया जीवो बा से गुड़िक सबुदिन पे बंद करी दिया जीवो. Workers have faced the prospect of retrenchment. जो माने सेठारे नियोजित हेतिले एम्प्लॉयड हेतिले से माने चाकरी हरेवा परिस्थिति सम्मुखीन हेले. And there were working class movement. This was the outcome of globalization. Workers have faced the prospect of retrenchment. There have been cases of voluntary retirement schemes, VRS. Casualization and contractualization of workers have been other accompaniments of globalization. Casual सामयिक नियुक्ति बा contractual ठिका श्रमिक. It is the outcome of globalization. The practice of keeping contract and casual laborer in place of regular employees has become widespread, and this led to the social movements. Middle class, on the job front, the complete story is not so dismal because globalization has also unfolded big opportunities for lots of people, particularly of the upper middle class. This is especially true that people having degrees from famous IITs, IIMs, who are in big demand both in India and abroad. The students from such premier institutions walk away with unheard of pay pockets. India churns out more than 70,000 computer professionals every year in addition to the graduates from IIT. This is called brain drain, technical manpower for the purpose of heavy pay desire go out of India, and India is losing the skilled technical manpower due to this. India has emerged as a powerful player in the world in the IT sector. India's advance in the IT sector has attracted many American and European companies to locate their back office operation in Bangalore, Chennai, Pune, and Gurgaon, etc. The shifting of back office operations of foreign companies has been influenced by many factors like abundant supply of cheap labor, cheap satellite communication, and the facilities of internet. While this development has created tremendous job opportunities in India, it has been used by foreign companies as a cost-cutting arrangement. These back office operations range from billing to payroll handling, airline reservation to answering customer complaints. These many Dalit leaders like Ram Vilas Paswan, Social Justice Minister in UPA government, led by Manmohan Singh, Meera Kumar, have appealed for reservation even in the private sector. So there was a cry for reservation. Women, globalization can be seen as an ideology committed to production for profit, which leads to relative and absolute deprivation of women, colonies, and marginal groups and communities. The exigencies of competition and market are used to enforce policies which aims at profit making at the expense of people and planet. They are also fighting for men's equal participation in society. They also demand for recognition of the value of the social support provided by women in the form of child care, health, educational services. This is the legacy of globalization, networking and cooperation. Most of the social movements are generally preoccupied with their own particular struggle. They are gripped with the mindset of our movement and their movement. This exclusiveness makes them vulnerable in the event of oppression unleashed by state. This is all about globalization and social movement. We have completed 5 units today, and the learners are requested to ask the questions which they face as their doubt. We shall have doubt clearing session this time. The students, the learners may ask questions as their doubt. Hello.
ସାର୍ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ କ'ଣ କଲେଜରେ ସବମିସନ୍ କରିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ?
ସାର୍ ସେଟା ସାର୍ କହିବେ ପ୍ରଭାତ ସାର୍, ସାର୍ଙ୍କଠୁ ବୁଝି ନେବାଟା ବେଟର ହବ।
ଆଜ୍ଞା।
I missed 11th July, Sangram Badge, 11th July. Can I see? You may ask Sangram Badge, you may ask Prabhat sir.
ସାର୍ କାଲିର କ୍ଲାସଟା କରିପାରିନଥିଲି, ସେଇଟା କରିହେବ କି?
No, what happened?
Sir, doubt clearing session we are continuing. ପିଲାମାନେ ଗତକାଲି କ'ଣ ପିଲାମାନେ ଯୋଉ କ୍ଲାସ୍ ଆଟେଣ୍ଡ କରିପାରିନଥିଲେ ସେଇଟା ପାଇଁ କ'ଣ ବୁଝିବା ପାଇଁ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି?
ସେମାନେ ଭିଡିଓ ଦେଖିପାରିବେ ସେଥିରୁ ଅନଲାଇନରୁ ଅନଲାଇନରେ ଭିଡିଓ ଦେଖିଦେବେ କାଲିର ଯୋଉ କ୍ଲାସ୍।
ଆଜ୍ଞା ସାର୍, ସେଟା ଲିଙ୍କଟା କେମିତି ମିଳିବ?
ଲିଙ୍କ ପୁରା ଦେଇଛି ମୁଁ ଅନଲାଇନ ଲିଙ୍କ ଉପରେ।
କାଲିର କ୍ଲାସ୍ ସେଠି ଦେଖିହେବ?
ସବୁ କ୍ଲାସର ଭିଡିଓ ଲିଙ୍କ ଦେଇଯିବା ଉପରେ। ତମେ ଦେଖୁନ ଚାଟ୍ ବକ୍ସ କି? ଚାଟ୍ ବକ୍ସ ଦେଖ, 3ଟା ଲିଙ୍କ ସେୟାର କରିଛି। ଉପର ଲିଙ୍କଟା ଭିଡିଓ ସେୟାର ଦେଖିପାରିବ, ତାପରେ କ୍ଲାସ ନୋଟ ଦେଖିପାରିବ, ଲେଖିପାରିବ ହେଲା। All the links have been shared, so you can go through that. You can go through those links, okay?
Okay, sir.
Any more question if you have? Otherwise, you will want to wind up.
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, dear learners. Okay, now we'll wind up the session.